Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Constantine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to talk about video sources and how to write about practice implementation. If you are new to the Writing Center, welcome. We're always happy to work with students throughout the ACU online programs. We have a variety of services, including webinars and videos such as this, consultations that can be arranged either in real time or by asynchronous appointments, where you schedule time, upload your paper before that time, we send you feedback via email, and then you can work with that whenever you're available. We also have templates, blog posts, and many other resources located on the Online Writing Center website. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, if you are familiar with the Writing Center, or if you are new, we do have a very large number of webinar recordings. And if you scroll down on our webinar page, you'll see this tabbed sorting thing, so you can look up classes by program. So for example, if you're in the leadership program, the EdD program, you went to the Lead EdD tab, that would show you the courses exactly for your program that have tie-in videos for us. And we're constantly expanding that. So check it out and see what we have in store for your class. All right, you'll see me using the APA course paper template today, which can be downloaded from our website. And if you're watching this on video, you might want to pause now and go download that so you'll have it ready when we get to that portion. You can also browse our videos through our YouTube channel. And with that, let's dive into our main learning objectives today. So we're going to start out with a review of APA citation and reference fundamentals. And then we'll talk specifically about how to format APA video citations and references. We'll move from there into discussing the specific Week 1 assignment for Leadership 736, which requires that you, among other things, be citing and referencing videos. We'll talk about some of the writing requirements, and we'll finish with drafting and outlining. So let's dive into APA citation and reference fundamentals. Why is this important? Well, if you read through the guidelines for the EdD program, these are listed in each class, it does note that a percentage of points for every assignment is dedicated to your adherence to APA guidelines. And I always think it's a shame if you lose points on something like formatting. And also, we want people to be able to focus on the content of what you are writing and not get distracted by other things that don't quite look right. So by focusing on how things are supposed to look early, and by building a strong sense of the normative way that things look and are formatted in APA style, we're able to better focus on that content, and our readers are able to better focus on the content too. All right, so let's talk about APA style citations. They have 2 to 3 elements depending on what we're doing. An APA style citation should always tell you who wrote it, the author or authors of the source, and almost all the time will also state when was it published. If you're wondering about that exception, so default, the first time you mention a source, you need to give the author and date information, the year that it was published. But if you are repeatedly referencing that same source in the same paragraph, and there's no possibility of confusion about which source you're referring to, you can just use the author name as a shorthand. So you should always have who wrote it, the author name, and almost all the time you should have when it was published. And then sometimes, mainly when you are quoting or leaving notes to yourself on exactly where you found the information, you also include where exactly you can find it, which is going to be a page number, a paragraph number, or a timestamp depending on the source. Let's look at some samples for this. The column on the left will show you what the simple citations look like when you're not quoting, and so just author and date. And the column on the right will show you what it looks like if you are quoting. So Smith, parentheses 2010, or parentheses Smith, comma 2010. And if we're quoting, we just add the page number or page range. For example, P32, PP 32 to 33. The double P is part of indicating that it's a page range. If you have more than one author, we just add an and if it's outside of the parentheses, or an ampersand if it's inside. If you're working with a textual source that does not have page numbers, but has clear paragraphs, even if it's just one, we count the paragraphs and we just put the number. Para 3 is the third paragraph. And if it's a timestamp, something like music or a video, then we just, in lieu of the page or paragraph numbers, we give the time. So if everything they said occurred at the 0:32 mark, then you just list 0 minutes 32 seconds in your parenthetical citation. If it's something that unfolds over a range of seconds, we give the range there. And sometimes if you're referring to a particular scene, you'll have something longer than a couple seconds because you're talking about the events that occur in those specific minutes of the movie, say. All right, let's delve into that a little bit. So who wrote it? So this is the fundamental question of, okay, whose work are we talking about? To whom are we crediting these ideas? So if there's just one author, we're going to be giving the author's last name. For example, Ledesma, 2015. If there are two authors, we always give both authors' last names. But if it's 3 or more, in APA 7th edition, which is what we use at ACU, in APA 7th edition, we use the first author's last name and et al. Immediately when we are referring to 3 or more authors in a citation. Now, if it's the references, you'll spell out the first 20-something authors' last names in the references list. But if it's just a citation, 3 or more, immediately abbreviate to first author et al. So when was it published? Now, sometimes you'll get more information than just this, but in terms of parenthetical citations, you should almost always just be giving the year, like Smith, parentheses, 2019. Now, the exception is when you are trying to differentiate between more than one source that was by the same authors published in the same year. And if that comes up, you just sort them alphabetically in your reference list, and you letter the first as A, like 2012 A, 2012 B, 2012 C. But barring that exception, in your citations, you're just going to be listing the author's last name or last names and the publication year. If there is no publication year given, you can't find any on the source, then you use the abbreviation N period D period, which should all be lowercase. That stands for the Latin non datum, which just means not dated, no date. Now, if you are quoting, you are required to include some additional information to indicate the page number, the paragraph number, or the timestamp for that quote. And that allows the reader to easily find wherever that particular passage you're quoting from is in the original source. Now, you can also include that information if you're paraphrasing, and many students will do that so that they can quickly look it up later in case they're going to expand the section. But you're only technically required to include that when you're giving a direct quotation, in which case you would include it as part of the parentheses with the date, 2015, comma, P period, space, 12, for example. You can see that I've included examples that show how to do a page range as well, paragraph numbers, and how to include timestamps if this is an audio or visual source. The question sometimes comes up because in this particular course, there are several assignments that will provide transcripts of videos. So as an alternative to citing the video itself, you can cite the transcript, which some people find easier because then they can look at the specific text and you can select copy and paste to insert that quotation. Just make sure you mark it appropriately and don't forget. And that's fine. But if you were using the transcript, if you're referencing and citing the transcript, then that would be either paginated text if there are page numbers on the transcript, or non-paginated if it's just here are paragraphs. Now for the references, let's look at the most common examples. A journal article, it is going to follow the same formula that we use for everything. Who wrote it? then in parentheses, when was it published, what's it called, how to find it, and any other info that gets included for this particular type of source. So for this journal article, we see we have 5 authors. So we've got their last names and their initials. We have the publication year, that's 2019. What's it called? Well, the specific article is Emotions in Storybooks, a comparison of storybooks that represent ethnic and racial groups in the United States. How to find it? In this case, we go to the journal, Psychology of Popular Media Culture, 8, that's volume 8, issue 3, page 207 to 217, and because in this case it was accessed electronically, we include the DOI, the Digital Object Identifier, that's that link at the bottom. All right, so another common source that you will see a lot and be referencing a lot, a book chapter in an edited volume. And in this case, we have just one author, that's Dillard. JP is their first and middle initial. The title of the book chapter is Currents in the Study of Persuasion. We have 3 editors of the book, that's M.B. Oliver, A.A. Rainey, J. Bryant. Note that their initials go in front of their names here. And the title of the book is Media Effects, Advances in Theory and Research. And, it's helpful to know it's the 4th edition, and here's the page range, because if you went to the 3rd edition, those page numbers probably wouldn't match up. And it was published by Routledge. So, in a pinch, you could order the book from Routledge. So let's talk specifically about video citations and references. In the abstract and big picture sense, this follows exactly the same sort of ordering of information as we found in the journal articles and book chapters, which is to say, who wrote it, when was it published, what it's called, how to find it, and then any other info, like, say, a URL. So in our case here, let's look at a YouTube video link. You'll have a lot of YouTube videos in this course that you're citing, because there's so many excellent lectures that are now available. And that is quite a perk, because it used to be you need to go to the library and watch a VHS tape that the colors were all faded and the sound not great. Now you can watch it at home and rewatch it if you want to refer to it again. So, YouTube video. So we start out, who wrote it? In this case, that is not the speaker name, it's the channel name. So if you go to YouTube and you look, it says, oh, this is the Harvard University channel. Well, Harvard University goes down there. And for YouTube videos, they have not only the year of publication, but also the month and day. Now that information doesn't go into the parenthetical citations, but it does all go into the reference, which is why we have 2019, August 28th. The parenthetical citations, remember, just include the year part of the date. The title of this video is Soft Robotic Gripper for Jellyfish. There's a clarifying note in square brackets. This is a video. The publisher platform is YouTube, and then we include the link. Now the what's it called, how to find it, sometimes what's italicized will vary depending on the source type. So you'll note that here, YouTube, it's the title of the video itself that gets italicized. And that is because YouTube is not the name of the publication, but the platform. So it's more analogous to a print publication. You can see the citations with timestamps, it's the bottom 2. And for a TED Talk. So TED Talk videos can be accessed a variety of ways, but the 2 most likely ones that you're going to view them are either on YouTube, in which case you just use the YouTube formatting here, or on the TED Talk website. You'll note that there's slight differences here. Although the basic information is the same, who wrote it, when it was published, what it's called, how to find it, and any other info. For the TED Talk website, for their homemade video platform that they use, they do not actually list the publication day. They only have, right now, the publication year and month. So while on YouTube you would include 2019 August 28th, that's year, month, and day. For TED Talks, on the TED Talk website, because they do not include the day, you just include year, comma, month. Everything else here is the same. basically, except in this case, rather than having channel names like YouTube has, because TED Talk is a more concise, more circumspect platform, they will list the name of the speaker in the same place that you would have the channel name on YouTube. So it's the same basic idea, but because the platforms are not quite 100% the same, if you're using a video on the TED Talk website, you will cite it a little bit differently than if you're citing that same video on the YouTube website. All right, so let's take a look now at the specific assignment. So this is for Leadership 736, the Week 1 assignment, number 1, Positive Leadership and Positive Organizational Scholarship. So this requires that you write a 3 to 5 page paper that must include an introduction and conclusion, and then a list of things to discuss. And note this specific instruction, please be sure to use the following headlines in bold per APA style. And we have 3 headings there: introduction, application, and conclusion. We'll talk about the headings in a moment, but in general, if your instructor says, do this, I do recommend doing that. So let's start out from all right, they've given you some organizational headings, make sure to have those. And we have this prompt, consider Kim Cameron's perspective on positive leadership in the context of your leadership, your current organization, if applicable, and to the larger field of leadership. So that's 3 different things. And then there's some specific questions that were given to answer or to use as a basis for these explorations. Those are, what are the most outstanding components of positive leadership or positive organizational scholarship to you? How will they inform your leadership practice? Note that that's asking about the future. You could also, in terms of talking about your leadership, you could also answer that in the present or describe what you're doing now or have done in the past and how that relates to the future. Next up, for some leaders, this is not easy to adopt as it is an entirely new way of thinking for many. Is it challenging to you? That should not be just a yes or no answer. You should expand on it. Yes, it is challenging to me because of these reasons and therefore this. Or, no, it is not challenging because I've done this for a while, etc., etc. If you are explaining this to colleagues or your boss or another leader, what reactions might they have and how would you respond to them? This is actually giving you a great sense. You could easily write the whole paper by answering these questions and using that as the basis for your reflections on your leadership, your organization, and the field of leadership in general. And then, of course, a conclusion. And then there's a note saying that you can include other sources. Say if you've read ahead in the course a little bit and you want to use something from Module 2, you can, but you're not required to. And that's good to know. You don't have to do additional research for this. You could do it just with the sources that you view in Module 1. And it's always a good idea to take a look at the rubric and see where you should be spending the most time writing about different things. So let's start from the bottom up. So we see that 1/12 of the grade, so that's approximately 8.5% of the grade, which could definitely be the difference between an A and a B. 8.5% of the page is 8.5% of the final grade is this paper the right length? Is it formatted correctly in APA style? And have you put in the other basic things that you're asked to do? There's another 1/6 of that, so about 16% of the grade is this doctoral level writing. Simple. So there's a good portion of the grade, actually about 1/4 of the grade here, comes from, does this look right? Does this read well? Is it written at an appropriate level? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So definitely you want to make sure you proofread this and check your APA formatting. But let's look at the rest. So of the content of the paper, if we're just talking about these first 2 rows here, we see that 2/3 of the content of the paper, or the grade for the content of the paper, is going for, have you identified the outstanding components of positive leadership or positive organizational scholarship and how they will inform your leadership practice. So it's asking you to demonstrate your understanding of the reading. And then The other portion, the remaining third of the content, should be about the potential challenges to self and others and how you plan to respond to those things. And that's very helpful to know, because it would be easy to write a very short summary of the literature and spend most of the time talking about yourself and your professional context. But if we look at the rubric here, we see, oh, if 2/3 of the grade is going for demonstrating your understanding of the literature, in which this case literature includes the videos you're being asked to watch, then that is a strong suggestion that you should be following a similar breakdown of your paper content. So of the 3 to 5 pages, if it's just a 3-page paper, around 2 pages I would suggest should be going for talking about the reading and listening for this week. And then 1 page about yourself. If you start out with that, then just adding the introduction and conclusion, you'll have a nice paper that's somewhere in the 4 to 5 page range. But you'll have started from the place of having made sure that you were doing what the assignment requires in rough proportions to the grades, to the points that are being given for those sections. All right, so at this point, we are going to start looking at how to go from the instructions to drafting this, including citing some of these videos here. So just as a reminder, whenever you're writing a paper like this, make sure you answer each prompt directly and then respond in detail. So short response and then unpack it. Make sure that you're using the language and wording of the prompt so it's clear you're doing the same things. Use consistent word choices to refer to the same things. And as you saw me do earlier, use the rubric and the instructions to come up with approximate headings and ideas for the section lengths. Anytime where there's something listed as a suggestion, I recommend strongly treating it as a requirement. So looking back at the instructions, when it says you may include other sources, but you are not required to, I would say take that as a use the sources that they have here guidance, the sources for Module 1, write a good paper on that, and then if you can make it even better by including some others, great, but focus on the Module 1 sources first. So now is a good time, if you haven't already, here's a quick way to grab the APA course paper template. Give you a moment to do that. All right, so I have open a copy of the template here, and make sure to fill in these placeholders with the information for your own class. And we'll go ahead and we'll replace this, starting out with just a quick copy and paste of the instructions. You'll see that this doesn't match the font, so let's go ahead, we'll click here, and we'll change to Match Destination Formatting. And now it looks a lot more like it should. But remember, APA headings have their own particular formatting. So if we go to the Styles pane here, we can unlock those and apply AP Level 1 to that, AP Level 1 to that, AP Level 1 to that. Now, let's see, I've got some extra spaces there. One of the things that you should be aware of is that APA style technically does not allow you to have a heading named Introduction. Now, if we go and look at the instructions for this paper, it says to have that. So that's what we call a house rule. The instruction is saying, you're in my class, my house, follow my rules. So it's an extension onto that. But if you sent this to the Writing Center for feedback, you might have someone saying, well, introduction, that you normally shouldn't have that. So treat that as okay, be sure that that's what the instructor wants you to do. Now, the instructions say, do that thing, and so you should be okay, but if in doubt, ask the instructor. All right, so looking at this, you could start working on outlining this just by italicizing this and saying, let's move this to the here, and just start typing in answers. Make sure you use the wording from the prompts. And as you're going through the reading, you can just start adding notes here, because right now this is just an outline. You're collecting your thoughts in response, and you can turn it into nice, elegant sentences and paragraphs later. But let's take a look at this. So this is saying, consider Kim Cameron's perspective on positive leadership. So at this point, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this course. So if we go to Module 1, so Module 1 corresponding to Week 1 here in this course, if we go to Week 1 Readings and Resources, so you're asked to comment on Kim Cameron's thoughts on this. Well, as it happens, we have three different things with Kim Cameron here. So you've got multiple points, and these will all be cited differently. So we've got the positive leadership text. Okay, you just cite that the way you would any other book. Podcast, TED Talk video, talk there. Let's start with this one here. So if I go ahead and open this up here, so this is a podcast that is available through Michelle McQuaid's website. And so now the question is how to cite this. Well, we have a couple different options here to choose from. APA Style Central. Now, APA Style Central is a free resource that is available to anyone. It complements the APA 7th manual in that it's a handy guide that you can view at any time you have an internet connection. There are more detailed examples and explanations in the APA 7th edition publication manual, but in a pinch, you can look up the most common ones here. So here, if we go to online media, you'll see that there are a variety of things here, like say if you were citing a Facebook page. But online media refers more particularly to social media and websites. What we actually want are audio-visual media, because this interview here has been packaged as a podcast. So specifically a type of audiovisual media. So we'll go to podcast references. And in this case, you'll see that there's different formats if you're citing a podcast itself, like if you're discussing the podcast in general, or if you are doing a specific episode. And anytime when you're talking about specific things that they said, you're probably talking about a podcast episode. So you can see the general format here. You can even copy and paste this to go ahead and jumpstart things when you are working here. So we can go ahead in the references. We'll paste this so we have an easy model to follow. Again, we're going to change to match destination formatting. And so that's there for us as a model. Now, if we go back and look at this website here, we'll see, okay, this is Dr. Michelle McQuaid's podcast, and we have this episode is called Developing Positive Leadership Practices. Okay, let's take a moment and write that up. So here's the entry here, and let's talk about how we got to this point. So there are a few things that you may or may not find in a given podcast, depending on how it's put up there. Now, if it's in, say, iTunes and you're accessing it through iTunes, it will have a year, month, and day stamp, because that's just how iTunes works. People have to enter that when they upload it. But we're accessing it on the website, and we don't know, based on what we've seen, when this was uploaded to the website. It just doesn't tell us. So we'll go through in order, and we'll start with, okay, who wrote it, or who's the author of this podcast? And here we see, oh, it's Dr. Michelle McQuaid. Now, we abbreviate that the same way we do authors normally in APA style, so that is how we get McQuaid, M. The doctor, the title, it doesn't enter into here. Because of the way that podcasts work, where you could have guest speakers and hosts, we're clarifying that McQuaid is the host, hence this. Now, on this webpage, you will not find a date here. You can search, but you're just not going to find one. So that's why we have N period, D period. Now, the title of the episode Developing Positive Leadership Practices podcast with Professor Kim Cameron, delivered by the Leaders Lab. Will some podcasts have more concise titles? Yes. But that's what this one happens to give us for the title here. They put it there, so we relay it here. Now, if you are accessing this through different means, for example, if you're going just through iTunes, you might get this form here. And so while it would not be incorrect to include this, because what this web page is saying this is called is here in the title field, Developing Positive Leadership Practices, podcast with Professor Kim Cameron, delivered by the Leaders Lab. That is the most correct. If you are looking at this and say, okay, well, if there are two possible correct ones, how do I know that my professor will agree? And the best thing to do is to email your professor saying, hey, I noticed that this website, this podcast is listed this way here and this way there. Which one would you like me to use? And if you're using this, you might include the episode count there. But in this case, this is not incorrect. I would say this is the more correct option if you are citing this podcast through this website, as opposed to grabbing it through Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or something like that. All right, continuing here. So there's this note in square brackets clarifying this is an audio podcast episode. This is the name of the podcast series. And then there's a direct link here. Now, if you were citing this through, again, another platform like Apple or Stitcher, some of this information might be different just from how it was entered in, like Apple Podcasts would have a date there, and this link would be different. And in some cases, a podcast appears on different platforms under different titles, or in countries under different titles, just like a book might have a different title if it's published in another country. So there we go, we have the first one. Now, if we look back here, okay, the interview with Robert Quinn, it's from the same podcast here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that one here. So knowing that it's the same, we can go ahead and we know that much of this will be the same. The host should be probably staying the same. We see, okay, the positive organization. All right, now alphabetically that will go here. And here, we're going with what the source used. They decided to abbreviate professor to prof. So, all right. And this is also delivered by the Leaders Lab. All right. And then the link will be different. Now you can surmise from the link that the podcast episode is going to be number 1 here and number 4 there. Great. So if we look at the guidelines here, we see there is the potential, if it's provided, of including a episode number there. In this case, looking through this checklist here, it says provide the episode number after the episode title. If the podcast does not number them, then you leave it out. So if you're looking through this and you say, oh, wait, that's clearly number 1, then you'd go here and say, all right, so that goes in parentheses before the square brackets. Great. And here, number 4. All right, so now remember when I was talking about if you have more than one source published in the same year? Well, the same idea holds true if we have more than one source by the same author that's not dated. So this would become our NDA, and that would be our NDB. Now that looks a little bit odd. It looks unbalanced because we're missing periods there. That's why if we're using ND, we also put a dash there. So N period, D period, dash, and then the letter. And that helps visually say, okay, there's not a missing period. It is supposed to be, that's ND's A, this is ND's B. All right, now we're done with these two sources. Let's go look at some of the other things that we have here. Well, here we have a TED Talk. So if you go ahead and hit play on this, Oh, we can watch it on YouTube. Great. So we'll open that up. And when it finishes loading on YouTube, we'll be able to grab all the information to cite this as a YouTube video, which, as I mentioned earlier, will have a little bit of info that's not on the TED Talk website, because the TED Talk website does not include things like the day of publication. All right, so that'll catch up for a moment. And some of the things we'll need. Of course, we will need the link. We need the title of the channel. And the title of the channel is TEDx Talks. All right. So alphabetically, that's going here. Date here, that's the date for this video. That's July 18, 2018. Title of the video itself, we just go with this here. So that whole string there, even if it's long and kind of cumbersome, we will use it. And what else do we need? Well, if you're in doubt, just go ahead and head back to the APA Style website and we will double check. But we know that as a YouTube video, we are going to need that link for sure. We're also going to need to indicate that it is on YouTube. And then for the rest, well, we go ahead and we check. So here on the reference examples page, if we're looking for YouTube video references, see, okay, we're citing a YouTube video. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and take the title here, italicize that. We're going to go ahead and put a note in square brackets saying that's a video. And there we have it. Name of the channel, publication date, title of the video, a label saying it's a video, platform is YouTube, here's a direct link. There we go. You now have a reference for that. So let's go look back and see what we have left here that we haven't done yet. We have a video here on a university website. Okay, so that's a little bit particular. Now it's going to follow the same general form as the YouTube and TED Talk things, but let's see what they give us, because they might be leaving out particular bits of information, just like the TED platform leaves out the publication day and just gives you the year and month. We'll see what the University of Michigan's platform has here. And if you are looking at the examples here, you'll see that there's some general ones that you can use if you can't find exactly what you're looking for. And there are more examples in the APA manual. All right, so we want the University of Michigan. Now, this one is a little bit tricky in what they don't tell you. So we know that this is a video here. We can get a link there. We have a title at the bottom, but does it give us everything quite as neatly organized and labeled as, say, the YouTube platform or the TED Talk platform? No. And we can still get what we need. And if they leave it out, then we don't include whatever was left out. But we have the starting point for what we need to get started. Now, if you look at the bottom here, or at the top here, you'll get a couple clues to make sense of what we have. So it says, oh, Positive Links Speaker Series presents. Okay, great, we know what this is. Ross Media Business, so this is actually at the business school at the University of Michigan. So in a similar fashion to before, what's the name of the platform or host for the series? Just like TED Talks here, this is going to be the School of Business at the University of Michigan. What's our date? Well, we don't have one. It helpfully tells us here that this was in 2015, which you can gather a little bit from watching the video. But in our case, let's go ahead and start putting down what we have. And in this case, I can just hit Command A, select all, to grab the text there. And then I can massage that more easily in Word. All right, so here we have the title of the piece here. And yeah, what gets put down as a title, this is listed here as the title of it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to italicize that. Positive link speaker series, that is a proper noun, so we leave that, but this gets turned into regular sentence case because these are not being used as proper adjectives or proper nouns. All right, so now what do we need here? We need to know how to get that. Well, that's where that URL comes in. All right, now you'll see that because this did not provide us with all the information, we can't, but we still have the essence here. So this is published through the School of Business. We have the publication year, we have a title, we have a URL. This is what a reader needs to find the source. Now it's worth taking a little look at what to do when you get a very long and awkward title like that. So what you want to do for that is to introduce an abbreviation. So for example, if you were doing that, if we're referring to Kim Cameron here, identified, and then you write whatever you do, the first time you cite it, you would spell out the whole thing, and then you can introduce a abbreviation, like in this case, SMR, and then thereafter you would cite it as SMR 2015. Now that abbreviation gets introduced in square brackets the first time you spell out the whole name, and then you do not include it here. In a previous version of APA you did, but not in the current one. Alright, so that's how you would cite that source. Now, with this webinar, we want to make sure that you are describing your understanding of the literature, and not just summarizing, but also synthesizing it. So here's some ways to do that. So if you're listing and this, okay, here are the ones. And you can include examples from your own experience. So, okay, describe it. Okay, what is the thing? Where did it come from? State why it's important, which could be something like, you've often noticed that this comes up. As a result, this thing they suggested to do will be helpful for resolving the situation. And so that not only shows that you have some understanding of the literature, but also how to apply the things in practice. And that is an important important component of writing at the graduate level. Keeping in mind, you'll be having a separate section where you delve into that in more detail. Some of which could be here. Looking at this, we just copied and pasted this to start. I would say that this is definitely stuff that should be in the application section. So we'll just move that down there, and then you can work on expanding your outline after that. Now, here's a good illustration of how sometimes people get confused about who to be citing. Because while Kim Cameron is a speaker here, they are not the author of the video that went on. And the video is published under the imprimatur of the Stephen M. Ross School of Business of the University of Michigan, so they get listed as the author, which is why we'd be using SMR 2015 to cite this thereafter. Similarly, if we look at this, we'd be citing McQuaid NDA, McQuaid NDB, or TEDx Talks 2018. Now, you can still refer to the speaker in there, but like in a video lecture, Cameron, parentheses, TEDx Talks 2018 said, oh, yeah, I'll write that out for you to see. And then you have your quote in here. And then at the end, we'd have our timestamp flag. So you can refer to the speaker, but then to clarify, oh, where are you for that? Oh, in the TEDx Talks source from 2018. They stated that, and here's our quote, replacing the square brackets, and then the timestamp for that. All right, so I hope that this look at how to cite and refer to video sources has been helpful to you. Here at the ACU Writing Center, we get questions all the time from students who have written much of their paper, but then they need to make sure that it is reading correctly in APA style. And that's fine. You can send us quick questions via email. You can send us a list of questions as part of an appointment. Or if you've got a lot of stuff and you just want to ask questions in real time, you can send us an email and ask to schedule a real-time appointment. Just tell us as much as you can about what you're asking about, because sometimes we have a video resource, or we might pair you with a particular staff member to get you expert feedback on that particular thing. Thanks for joining us.